Good evening, everyone, and I would like to welcome you and call to order our first meeting for 2022 of the Lucan Biddulph Council for January 4th. Is there any disclosure of pecuniary interest? So welcome to 2022. And I know how I am feeling because of yesterday's provincial announcement. I was pretty deflated yesterday, so I can only imagine how many of you might be feeling. So rather than focusing on that announcement and the challenges that we continue to face, I want to start the new year off with good news. It gives me great pleasure to share with you the 2022 Mayor's Honor Roll. Once again, we put out a call to our residents asking for nominations of those in the community that people felt were worthy of this honor. And once again, we were not disappointed. It is clear we have a community of caring and involved residents. Abigail, Isabel, and Avery Hyundai were nominated and are being recognized for their commitment to beautifying and keeping Lucan clean. Every spring, these girls, under their parents' supervision, walk the banks of the stream near their home, picking up garbage and debris that doesn't belong in the water. Over the years, they have picked up everything from beer bottles to scooters and many more items that should be disposed of in other ways. They fill multiple garbage and recycling bags. As their nominator called them, they are nature's heroes. Their commitment to the environment serves as an example for not only other young people, but for all of our residents. Gail Lewis is a familiar face around Lucan. If you're a supporter of the Optimist thrift store, then you've likely been helped out by Gail. She spends many hours volunteering at the store. Gail is also a dedicated volunteer at the Lucan Legion. She is the treasurer as well as the Poppy campaign chair. She is responsible for the organization of the Community Remembrance Day services. She is the tireless volunteer bartender at the Legion. If you have supported the Legion on Friday nights and now Monday nights as well, Gail has poured you a beer and cooked your wings, either for eat in or take out. Gail has been the one at the Legion who is committed to keeping the kitchen open at the Legion even during the most challenging of times. She has put in countless volunteer hours and without a doubt is an irreplaceable asset to the Legion. John Herbert is a retired teacher who continues to teach. Not one to sit idly, John has offered tutoring sessions at Villages United for those kids in need of a little extra help. While math is his specialty, he has been known to bluff his way through other subjects to provide assistance and growth where needed. John does not charge for these sessions, but will gladly accept donations for the Elsa Craig Food Bank. John is an avid gardener with the Granton Gardeners Program and helps with the community donation program, donating fresh produce to our local food bank. He has collected and delivered many pounds of produce that help support families in our area. John is a longtime blood donor. He continually encourages commitment to community in small ways and always acknowledging that any effort can make a big difference. Gord Duncan hasn't let retirement from the ministry stop him. Gord is a longtime hospital visitor and has only been interrupted in his visiting because of the pandemic. Locally, he volunteers for the VON and continues to drive Lucan and area residents to their various appointments and delivers Meals on Wheels to shut-ins across our community. Gord is responsible for organizing a group of Lucan and now Villages United Church members to clean the roadside biannually between Elginfield and Lucan on Highway 4. It is clear that at 83, Gord knows the importance of contributing to community and is not showing any signs of slowing down. I would also like to acknowledge these honorable mentions. The work of a couple women in our community. Dawn Warnock Thompson of Granton and Para I knew I was going to mess this up, Taryn. I am so sorry, but Pestoka of Lucan. Both women arranged for treats to be collected and distributed to kiddies in our community who could not trick or treat at Halloween this past year because of COVID outbreaks in our community. These women are shining examples of seeing a need and finding a community solution. Once again, COVID restrictions will prevent us from getting all the recipients together. We will be making arrangements to deliver these awards to these worthy honorees. Please watch our social media in the coming weeks as we will be sharing our deliveries with you. Thank you to all those who nominated people in our community and to those who continue to make Lucan Biddulph such a great place to work, play, and live. So tonight we do have a delegation, and this is a continuing discussion that we started in 2021 of our Lucan Biddulph Municipal Comprehensive Review Draft Official Plan. It's being presented tonight by Dan Fitzgerald. As we all know, we have been working closely with Stuart Finlater from Finlater and Associates. Unfortunately, Stuart can't join us tonight because he's ill, but Dan has worked very closely with Stuart on this document, and I trust that Dan will be able to walk us through the discussion that we will undertake this evening. So Dan, welcome, and I will turn it over to you.
Good evening. So thanks, Mayor and members of Council, as well as the public that are watching here tonight. I will start off by providing a brief background of where we're at based on what we've done and the recommendations brought forward to date. So the Municipal Comprehensive Review process is being conducted as part of provincial requirements to review official plans essentially every 5 years. This review process does intend to implement textual changes as required by the Provincial Policy Statement 2020 to review and provide recommendations for potential settlement boundary expansions in light of the ability for municipalities to forecast growth as well as identify lands necessary for a 25-year growth projection and also to review and update policies related to housing. So of note, the proposed official plan amendment would introduce low, medium, and high density development design standards for Lucan. It focused on guiding appropriate development for Lucan, which fits into and respectfully transitions the existing character of the community. That's something we've heard quite a bit about in the past. It would also introduce additional residential unit policies as required by the PPS and provides consideration for modular and prefabricated homes in addition to tiny dwellings based on current market forecasts and demands. So regarding the population projections and potential settlement boundary expansions, and as Council may be aware, the County of Middlesex undertook a land needs assessment through Watson Associates. The study, as completed, provided 3 potential growth scenarios, those being for low, a midline, as well as high growth scenarios for projected growth for the next 25 years. The municipal and county consultant Finlater and Associates has recommended proceeding with the high growth scenario, which would see an additional land need of approximately 56 hectares into Lucan Biddulph. This additional land need is based on a projected population growth in Lucan Biddulph of approximately 3,150 people for a total projected population of 8,710, which does include the census undercount by 2046. A draft official plan amendment was prepared and public meeting was held on November 30th, where staff and council heard comments primarily from landowners requesting inclusion within the settlement boundary. As proposed, the draft official plan map schedule would include the designation of lands along the north and east boundary of the settlement area, certainly subject still to further discussion. Staff have continued to receive letters from the public, which are attached to the council agenda package and are available for the public to review as well. So that brings us to why we are here tonight. So the purpose of this discussion tonight really is to provide council with the opportunity to ask questions or seek clarification from staff regarding the official plan comprehensive review process, and also to provide input on the proposed draft official plan. So with that, I'll keep it brief. Hopefully I'll be able to answer questions. If not, I will defer it back and maybe we can bring it back to a later date. With that said, I'll turn it back over to council.
Okay, thank you, Dan. So as Dan reminded us, we did have a public meeting that we all attended and were able to hear comments from the public. So now this is our time and our opportunity to ask questions, to offer input. And at this time, I will open it up for discussion. And I will remind council that there is a lot in this document. Beyond just the land designation, as Dan referenced, there are policy updates, and certainly now is the time to offer your input, ask your questions on that as well. So I will open it up to council at this time. Deputy Mayor Manders.
For now, I'm just going to start my comments, and then probably a lot of comments throughout the night, actually, as I think of things. But I guess I wanted Dan. I was thinking more of our official plan amendments and the tiny houses and the modular houses and granny suites, Dan. So that is, obviously when you're involved in a municipality like we are as council members, we read about this stuff, we see it. I'm not surprised to see it on there, but I think when the first tiny house goes up beside a house, there's going to be a lot of emails and jaws dropped. It's hard to get this communication out that this is happening. And I actually don't want to come across that I'm opposed to that at all, but I can't be opposed to it because this is forced on our municipality. Is that correct?
Through the chair to council Manders, technically no, the tiny home policy is not something that is being forced upon local municipalities. That's specific to the additional residential housing units requirements. This is something that we kind of took a forward approach in and looking at, just saying, introducing the idea in the official plan, which can then get further regulated in your zoning bylaw if that's something that council wants to proceed with.
So this is something that if we pass this, eventually, so this won't be reworded, but this doesn't mean it's a green light to have this in our community, is what you're saying.
Through the chair, what it would do is it would provide the ability or opportunity for an individual to apply for something like this. However, recognizing the fact that we don't actually have the zoning standards in place. So that's something that if council did agree with that particular idea, we would have to go back into the zoning bylaw and figure out primarily how we're going to make that work moving forward.
Then realistically, opposing it, at least what I, sometimes over the years from staff, you hear, you oppose it, you're probably wasting the township money, appealing it, opposing it because an OMB hearing, this is something that's accepted in the province of Ontario, almost, correct? Like we are almost, I guess you're not dancing around the force, but I think we need to realize that we probably need to accept it eventually. Would that be a fair comment or no?
Through the chair, I mean, every local jurisdiction certainly has the ability to develop their own vision and how they want to develop and their own guidelines. I would say that we do field a lot of questions on this particular topic of tiny homes or modular homes, especially with housing affordability the way it is right now. So that's something, it's certainly a much more fluid and emerging topic across all local jurisdictions, is the idea of, smaller homes, more affordable homes for individuals.
And then where the discussion of a DC charge or sewer and water hookup, way too early for a discussion, or can you comment on that?
Through the chair, it would be hard to say how that fits in. Typically, DCs are based on per unit developments, so I'm not exactly sure how that would work in terms of a tiny home versus a single family home versus a semi or a triplex or an apartment and so on. But it's something that we could look at in terms of DCs of, because you're right, in the instance of a tiny home, maybe a tiny home doesn't require such a large lot. So maybe there's an opportunity there to look at what that impact is on a DC charge.
Okay, that's it for me for now. I'll be commenting through the session.
If council doesn't mind, I might just jump off what the deputy mayor's brought up. And just with regards to the DCs, I mean, there's talk that we will likely have to open that up again this year. So certainly that's something we could add to it. But just for clarification, to include the tiny homes in the official plan, we would then have to go through the next procedure of updating zoning and how that looks. And would then that be like do you look at just the zoning for tiny homes in general, or is it a case by case basis? So if I have a plot of land and I apply for that, then am I applying for specific zoning to that area, or do you look at zoning for tiny homes in general?
So through the chair to the mayor, yeah, that's a good question. And honestly, that's really going to depend on how you want to proceed in terms of your zoning bylaw. If it's a standalone use that you want to identify, or if it's just considered a dwelling unit. I would probably say preliminarily from a high level that it may be something that you want to look at on a case-by-case basis.
Okay.
I'm sure things like neighborhood fit are appropriate. I've even seen instances of individuals looking at tiny home neighborhoods on that scale, so that may be an appropriate fit in a certain instance. So maybe to start off to see if the uptake is there, then a case-by-case basis is maybe not necessarily, or maybe the best way to go.
Okay. But I guess what we can, just from this short conversation that we're having, is that even if this is in the official plan, there's still more work that needs to be done before anybody can actually put a tiny home up.
Through the chair, yes, no, you're absolutely correct. And that's pretty consistent with a lot of those policies. It just kind of, a lot of them just kind of introduce the idea of that being possible. Yeah. But we'd still have to go back and look at the zoning bylaw and say, how are we going to make this actually fit into the community?
Okay. And then with regards to the granny flats or the garden suites, that is though what is coming from the province, that we have to make opportunity for that, and we have to include that, correct?
Through the chair, yes, you are correct.
Okay.
So in maybe just to provide a little bit of context, so through the provincial policy statement 2020, there was an addition of a section that basically requires local jurisdictions or local municipalities, both upper and lower tiers, to provide provisions for what they call additional residential units within your municipality. So what that means by their definition is your traditional one unit on the property, then one additional unit in that building. So if it's a single family home, it would be provisions for something like a basement suite or another suite on the second story. So there'd be 2 units in the main dwelling, and then a third additional unit on the lands in the form of something like a garden suite or a carriage house or something of that nature. So the province has mandated that local jurisdictions have to include policies for additional residential units in their zoning. But they haven't said where it's appropriate to do so. So that's really what we're talking about, is where does council see that being an appropriate solution for intensification? Is that something you want to limit to the urban areas? Is that something you'd like to limit to the rural areas? Or is that something you'd like to see in both?
And that's decided at the official plan level, not at the zoning level?
So through the chair, what I would say is, to a certain degree, yes, it would be established at the official plan level, because the policies will speak specifically to either urban or rural areas or both.
Okay. And right now, I think the way it is in the draft, it is in all 3, right? it addresses it in urban and rural setting.
Through the chair, that is correct. So technically the verbiage is included in both Lucan and Granton. It's not technically included as a use in the agricultural areas. However, there are policy wording that's actually in the Lucan and Granton area that refers back to the agricultural areas. And the reason why we kept that in there is because it gives you an idea as to if we did include it in the rural areas, this is what it would mean. So really, it's going to be direction from council. Where do you see that best happening? Certainly, we'll be providing input on that in terms of recommendations coming back to council as well. We're still working on it. We're still digesting it ourselves at the county level. But from a local level, it's primarily where do you see that opportunity happening?
Okay. All right. Thank you for those clarifications. I guess I'll open it up again to council at this time. Councillor Reagan.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. If I may, I just have a question first about just something, and then I have a comment, and then as the night proceeds, I'll have more questions and comments, I'm sure. So my first question would be that the 138 acres is based on a high growth model, and I really need to, and I don't see the rationale for using a high growth model. And I wonder if you can, that's my question, and then I have a comment after, if I may, Madam Mayor. Thank you.
So through the chair, I'll do my best. I don't want to interpret things on behalf of Stuart. It is technically Mr. Finletter's report, but I will do my best. So the Watson and Associates background study that was completed through the County of Middlesex did provide the 3 rationalized growth scenarios for basically what we're going to see in terms of population growth for Lucan Biddulph. It did it for all the local municipalities off of Middlesex County. So in all particular situations, they looked at what can we feasibly see as a growth forecast for the different local municipalities. In this case, I believe the intent for the high growth scenario was based on the level of demand that we were experiencing and expecting for Lucan Biddulph. However, with that said, council doesn't have to accept that. So they could choose to go with the low growth scenario or the moderate growth scenario. The high growth scenario was just based on what we were experiencing in terms of development activity, as well as potential future investments into infrastructure as well.
The follow-up, Madam Mayor, if I may. So if we use the low growth scenario, then what would be the need for acreage? Like, what would the acreage number be? Would it still be 138, or would it be less?
Through the chair, it would be much less than that. I'd have to come back with an answer for you.
All right. Okay. All right. Thank you. All right. So we can, I guess we can pass that on to Stuart as Madam Mayor. Would that be acceptable?
Yeah, and if I'm not mistaken, excuse me, it might even be spelt out. Is it spelt out in the Watson report? Like, or was it just, I know the low, medium, and high, but I don't know whether it actually spelt out the acreage, but for some reason, I don't know. I think that it did. But.
So through the chair, what it does is it provides a low reference and a high scenario. So it actually just gives the population numbers.
Right.
And then further from that, it provides a persons per unit calculation. So what we did with Stuart was take the people per unit numbers for the high growth scenario, and based on the high population, subtracted what we had for units that are developable currently within the municipality, and additional, whatever surplus lands that we currently have. And then from there, figured out what or what additional lands we needed based on a persons per unit to reach that population threshold of the 8,710 individuals. So it would just take some math to go back and say, based on this lower growth scenario and this persons per unit, we would need this X amount of land.
Okay.
So that's something certainly we can bring back for council.
Okay. Thank you.
And then, so just to be clear, this report's based on the high growth model, right? Just why I want to make sure I understand that. That's right. Okay, thank you. Okay.
Through the chair, yeah, I know you were correct. So the lands that are identified in terms of settlement boundary expansion take into account the high growth scenario with the, I think it's 2.5 persons per unit measurement.
Right.
Okay. Follow up, Daniel?
Well, a comment now, if I may, Madam Mayor.
Yep, sure.
Thank you. So, it was interesting that the Deputy Mayor started when we were talking about the garden suites and tiny homes and things. And as I was reading the report, and just you'll have to indulge me, council, thank you, and staff, but I'm reading through the report and I started seeing things like infilling and garden suites and these sorts of things. And I thought to myself, very progressive kind of report. And then and I thought, intensification and using those types of land. And I thought what was really interesting to me is just sort of that recommendation of sort of where future residential might go in the northeast of in the community, kind of ignoring everything else. And I just wanted to get it right out there, is I'm thinking, and I was really happy to see that at first, but then the talk about the infilling and using, thinking about the future, like garden suites, for example, and the number of people in our community who are going to be older, like myself in 20 years, that are going to be, maybe that's an option for me. And I'm thinking, way to go, great planning, because that's what we have to think about. But as I'm reading the rest of it, and I'm thinking what this is lacking, and it's a little upsetting to me, is that it really lacks any kind of developmental or locational diversity. To me, there's no options for people based on this. Really no options I don't see now or in the future. I mean, there's got to be some kind of choice that people have, some sort of, if you have 3 or 4 developers, developing throughout the community in different locations, that leads to competition, at least a healthy competition. That gives people choice. And Stuart, or not Stuart, sorry, go ahead. Sorry.
Councillor Reagan, I'm just going to caution council that when we are talking about lands, we shouldn't be identifying them by specific owners. We want to look at the parcels of land individually as to where they are in the community. So we want to take out any interests that might be there and just focus on where the land is. And our considerations should be where we want to put people, services, all of that.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think I was doing that, was I? I apologize if I was doing that.
Just want to caution.
Yeah. Okay. No.
Okay.
Right.
Thank you.
So one of the terms that was used was affordability, and I think we have to use the term attainability. So we're not building homes, we're building community. And I guess my concern is I'm concerned just about, where we're building and where we think we should build, where we want to put people. And I'm thinking about sort of the future of the community. We think about the community center and we think about lands around that area, or the future residential or future commercial development. And I'm just concerned that I just don't see any of that. We're going to be spending a fair sum of money on our community center. That's coming up very soon, and we want to be able to use that sort of thing. So I guess what I'm just trying to say is that when I'm seeing this, is for some of this is I understand that there's a lot of, we're talking about how things are going to be looking, but I'm just wondering, like, we have to be really careful, I think, and this isn't a meeting. My understanding is we're supposed to give direction to staff and as to what we want to see, I think. And I think what people are telling me is they want to see that, they want to see those options. They want, I think we need to use this opportunity to make our community a little bit different and look a little bit different. I don't know if that's sort of making any sense. And I'm not trying to identify any areas. I'm just trying to say, I'm just thinking that when I'm looking at this map here, I'm thinking of other areas that would probably make a little bit more sense. And again, my concern is, I guess primarily, and we'll come back to it later, I'm pretty sure, is we need to have some sort of, we need to have options for people, like just, over the next, this is a 20-year decision, 25-year decision we're making. And I think when we think about, what's our focus, and we've talked about, example, I'm gonna go back to the community center. We have talked about that so many times about being the hub of the community. Every member of council's used that term as being the hub. So why are we not looking at that? And this report doesn't speak to that as far as I'm concerned. So, all right, that's enough for now.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Regan. Any other comments or questions? Councillor Westman.
Yeah, I really want to reiterate what Councillor Regan is saying about, we're focusing a lot of our growth in areas that are away from the core, away from our hubs, heading out north. And that's, I just think we need to have a better community vision than that. And, I'll still hold my point that I made before. I think the community center and the downtown needs to be identified as our pinnacle point, and that we grow outward from there, not just in one linear direction away where we've been building so long. So I'm sure we can make it work. I think that's something that we need to keep on our mind. This report doesn't necessarily give us that opportunity right now. So hopefully we can amend that as we go down the road.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Westman. Councillor Hodgins.
Thank you. My question is related to some of the comments we received from external agencies. So the Thames Valley District School Board advised that they will require a new school in the community if the proposed expansion is approved. So I just want to understand, I guess, what the process would be for adding a new school, and how that may affect the township, and if there's thoughts to, where that would be located and how that would work.
Okay, don't know, Dan, if you can kind of walk us through that question.
Through the chair, yeah. So that's a really broad question, honestly. So yeah, you're 100% right. If you're going to grow your population by 3,100 individuals over the next 25 years, of course you're going to need another school, because that growth is going to primarily happen in the younger ages, in the younger groups, and you've already got a situation in a school that's bursting at the seams, if you will. So I've been in discussion with Thames Valley District School Board and their planning staff about looking at the potential future options for Lucan moving forward. So we're not necessarily saying at this particular point in time it's going to trigger, like, if you approve this land, a new school will have to be built. The school will get built over a phase as the development comes online. Keep in mind that this is a 25-year growth projection. So it's not all just going to happen all at once and the school is going to get built and you're going to be living this way. It's going to happen over phases. And what they're just basically identifying is the fact that, if Lucan's population is going to grow by this much, then we're going to have to put another school in Lucan at some point in time in the future. So we've had the offline discussions with them as to, well, where would you see a school going, or what does that look like for you? But it's so preliminary at this point that I wouldn't be able to really comment on it any further. But primarily as your populations grow, it's going to require a new school at some point in time, just like it could potentially require a new fire hall or all these other things that come with growth, right? So I don't want to speculate too far as to what that means. They've just identified the fact that, FYI flag, this will be required in the future. And honestly, it's not uncommon.
Did you follow up, Jaden?
No follow-up to that. I'll come back for questions later.
Okay. Any other further comment at this, Councillor or Deputy Mayor Manders?
I wrote down too what Jaden said, and I'm surprised Dan even took the question for anyone to try to vision the school board. I wish them well. The mayor probably wouldn't even like, me commenting on this, because again, it's not they've got a problem, they need to solve it. But, as you stated, busting at the seams, probably our current growth probably could almost use a new school. As I went door to door 3 years ago, was the comments I got. So it's an interesting thing. Like when I read that, the first thing I thought of was, again, where to put people. And, I was thinking of some of the lands that the proximity to the school for 10 months of the year, it is nice. But when you think 20 years out, the school is going to be somewhere in Lucan Biddulph, I assume, but where, nobody knows. So all of a sudden, I got to be honest, I took the current school almost not out of the picture altogether by no means, because that obviously could be one of two in our community or a larger one. But I guess, it leads me though, for my comment, which I'll have more on later, is just the variety and diversification and more. We're very fortunate to have 600 acres submitted to Lucan Biddulph, and having more areas and options and variety for our community to live and put people is going to be important. Not knowing that, I feel confident where we know our commercial development is going to be in 20 years. I feel confident knowing where our arena is going to be in 20 years. When I read that, I don't feel confident where a school is going to be. I don't. And if somebody wants to vision the school board, again, I credit Dan for trying to speak to the school board. So it's interesting when we really try to think where the best place to put people is and what we know. And you do got to make some decisions on what we know today. But again, when I look at what's presented currently and reading that about the school, even for the school to look at different opportunities where our services is, the more areas that we have services in our community will help them form their decision too. And that's going to be very important. It's not our job to secure land for them, but the more options that we can provide our school to talk to people with lands that are services that we can provide is only going to help our young families. So I just wanted to comment on that. Thank you.
No, I think those comments, I would echo those comments, Deputy Mayor Manders. And I guess the one positive, as much as we can be concerned about speaking with the school board, at least those discussions are happening, whereas I'm not convinced in the past that they had happened. So I think as our communities grow, as our community grows, there's an understanding that there needs to be a dialogue between the municipality and the school board, and at least we can kind of work together as we put these pieces together. Other comments or questions at this time? I guess one question I've got a couple questions, but the one I want to go back to, and it's more on the policy side of things. We did have a member of the public present to us at our special council meeting in November, bringing up land designation zoning in the industrial area to allow for fitness studios. And I guess that presentation I thought was a good one. I thought it was a great idea. And certainly that is something that I would like to see addressed in the official plan amendment. And unless, there's anybody that opposes that, I thought that the argument made for including that zoning made sense, or that those opportunities in industrial lands certainly made a lot of sense. So that would be that one. And then going back to the growth, I think what we've learned through the last few years is that for the most part, the lands that have been applied for all have servicing challenges. And I have an engineer in my family. He'll tell me anything can be engineered, anything can be done. But some areas are easier than others to do. And so, I think as council, which the deputy mayor continually says, is, we have to think about where we want to put people. But I don't want to leave the servicing off the table, because there have been there were presentations made that may have had differing views as to how the land could be best serviced. And when we think of some of the lands that were applied for on the other side of Highway 4, on the arena side, I think that in my talks with our staff, and then what was presented, there might have been a differing approach as to how to move our services through town. There's talk by some of the applicants of a booster station, whereas in speaking with our staff, thinking that maybe it needs to move across Highway 4 and up around the township office and through that property. If you can understand, I'm not very good with directions, so though everybody knows, up that way. And I guess, and maybe this is a question more so for Jeff, but I understand that developers will add the infrastructure that they need at their cost. But are there concerns, and this is for all the properties, because eventually those lands will become ours. And what does that mean for investment for our community? What are we responsible for? What is easier to do for what we are responsible for?
Madam Mayor, so I'll start with, and I think we've mentioned this before, but I'll just make sure we're all on the same page, that realistically, any of the lands that have been put forward, there is only one area which at this point fits in with the existing infrastructure without any real changes to both existing infrastructure, people that are already living here. It would fit in quite well, and I think that was discussed to the north of Gilmore, off of Campanelli. Every other property that has been submitted will have some sort of challenge, or I don't say challenge too much, but will have to be engineered at some point to access services. I think we're all aware that we're pretty good shape on water, so it all comes back to, at this point, on our sanitary and our stormwater control. Having said that, it's just a very small chunk of land that you could call that would fit easily into our existing system. So then if you look at the other lands that have put forward and where they sit and what kind of challenges exist, I think on the west side, or the side out that you mentioned out towards the arena side, there's a couple of, there's probably more than two, but there's two main options. You can bring it back through town, or you can look at a second pumping station and a second force main right to the plant. On the other side of town, if you went to east side of Saintsbury and to the southeast down there, at this point, you could, it's designed at this point down in that area to kind of follow the existing sanitary system and come back up through town. There is talk that if we did move forward towards Fallon, we could look at another force main station on the other side up there. So there's different options. I don't think, each property has that challenge to engineer it. Each property can be done. And then to follow up on your question, or your your follow-up is, what does this mean for the town? Because some of these developments, there's going to have to be upgrades if we decide to do certain developments. There will be upgrades through existing neighborhoods, which will reflect on other people's property as we rip up streets to say oversize or to put in new services to accommodate further development. So there is some of that that will have to be looked at. A lot of that, when we start replacing existing infrastructure, will fall under development charges. We'll pay that. Some of that will be paid through as upgrades to the system. Just a side note, not all development charges, or some of these projects, not all of it will be covered 100%. There will be a percentage that has to be paid through existing tax base, because you're replacing existing infrastructure. So there's a formula when they base that. So I don't want to say everything's paid 100% through DCs on some of these projects, but then you define some of the needs of a development, such as a pumping station that is designed just for that development. Then that would fall on the development or the developer, and would not fall under DC. So then that would be 100% back to the development of that tract of land. So it's a little bit confusing in the fact that there's different avenues at which we'll engineer each property. Each property will have a different effect on existing neighborhoods. But realistically, there's only one chunk of land that will fit in with a glove. The rest will all have to be looked at, will have to be studied and then engineered. So, but I think we've touched on that before. Does that sort of go where does that lead you into another question?
Well, I guess, and then the question would be, so and then just so I know, and this goes again for all parcels as we figure out our stormwater, and our sewage movement, anything that is put, like each landowner or developer then would work with the municipality to determine what the best route is, or can they just decide how they're going to do it?
Well, realistically, the municipality will guide, will provide guidance there.
Okay.
We're not going to be, I don't want to say, we'll take the lead on that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that's good. Then the other question I had, so all of these lands that have been requested, we're an agricultural community, so they abut agricultural lands. Many of them are agricultural use right now. And certainly, we could debate whether or not we should be taking agricultural land away for growth. But certainly, when you live in a small rural community, our options for growth are limited. And so these are the lands that we have the option to work with. But what does putting designations on these lands mean for abutting farm owners, for their business operations, and what might happen in the future? I guess that's a good place to start.
And is that for myself?
Chair,
I think that was for Dan. Sorry. Thanks, Jeff.
By all means, go ahead. Through the chair. So that honestly, that's a really good question. It's something that we do take into consideration when we're looking at settlement boundary expansions and what's the impact to the existing agricultural operations. Are there existing, say, like livestock facilities within that area? So the provincial policy statement does actually require us to look at MDS and what our potential impacts are for existing operations, so existing livestock operations for MDS setback requirements. It doesn't require us to speculate beyond what currently exists. So I think it would be unfair for us to speculate that, oh, we can't eliminate any opportunity for potential livestock expansion surrounding the entire of the agricultural area, because then you'd never be able to expand. So what we look at when we are going through these comprehensive review processes is, where are the existing MDS setback requirements, and how are we mitigating that, and how are we not impacting them? So in this particular instance, we looked at all of the existing potential MDS conflicts that are within the surrounding area, and that's actually why in the recommended settlement boundary expansion to the northwest end, you see a bit of a funny jog in the property that's listed. And the reason being is there's an existing livestock operation on the neighboring parcel of land. So we took into consideration what that MDS setback requirement would be based on the MAFRA guidelines, and then built that into where that settlement boundary line would be. So that line respects what that MDS setback would be. Does it limit any future opportunity for expansion? Technically, yes. However, the individual could apply for a minor variance if they wanted to expand their livestock operation on that particular facility.
Okay, thank you for that. I have to go back to my notes. Are there anybody else have question or comment at this point while I go back to my notes? Deputy Mayor Manders.
Yeah, I've got a number of things. One was I don't know what I'd like staff to consider too after this meeting is the cost effectiveness of the smaller development that we're seeing with the high intensification of the properties. We've done a plan of subdivision of 6 acres underneath the water tower. We've had a public meeting with south side for 6-acre development. We've had a public meeting for 20 acres, I believe, for Mike Ratcliffe's team. So I'm concerned on what's presented too, on the volume of land on each section of land, and that it's obviously cost effective to do a subdivision on 6 acres, and even going along Saintsbury and you double some of those properties, you go 6 to 12 acres, and you go 20 to 40, or add 10 acres. It's very substantial for growth and development in order to create, again, more of a variety of area for people to live in Lucan Biddulph and create more options. And I think compared to 20 years ago, 25 years ago, you needed to have maybe larger chunks to make it more cost effective, as there was much bigger lots. There wasn't the intensity of the housing and the condos and everything. So I do think I just feel that again, can these lands over by the arena side, by the commercial development, by Langford Lumber, all those areas today, it just seems like we seem to be caught up on the full amount being brought in, as opposed to smaller portions, and that'll create more options, that'll create variety and competition. And that's healthy for attainability. We can see right now, if anybody Googles housing for sale in Lucan Biddulph, we see what happens when there's no competition and options. You see right now today what we put ourselves in. But we've also put ourselves in that because we have no capacity. So for the developers. So I do want to, say that also. So we don't have that. But when we're doing a $15 million sewer plant, we want to have a lot of properties being developed. And and again, we have 2 6-acre developments being submitted for one approved and one being considered for subdivision plan of approval. So yeah, I don't know. I would just like to see, I just think that and I forget the term the person used at the open house. I found it interesting, Dan, maybe you'll remember, is that, you know, if you have these properties too, that almost like you're doing a 15-year and a 30-year, you can't obviously approve 260 acres, but it's like you do your first 130 and you bring it around the whole community, and then your next stage is almost already approved, so that the infrastructure, and they realize their investment that's the next step. I forget what the gentleman called that. It's almost like an approval for future development. I don't know. Do you know what I'm talking? Do you know what that comment was, Dan, or no? No, you know, I just can't think of what that comment was right now.
No, and I think that if I'm not mistaken, I'll have to go back because I think I made note. I know Ron and I have talked about it, that Stuart has addressed that in the OPA, the draft OPA, that you could essentially, for lack of a better term, almost like shadow in what the next phase would be,
look like, yeah,
what it would look like.
Yeah.
But I know he did use a specific term on that.
But you're correct. Yeah, sorry, go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, so through the chair, that is something that is possible. It's kind of a newer, honestly, a newer idea, I think, on Ontario, a newer and emerging idea, especially given the development pressures that we're facing now. I think it's something that Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing is more likely to consider, honestly. But it's basically what we're looking at is the potential options for what they would refer to as like a future overlay area. And what that is basically it's not identifying lands that are developable at this particular point in time, because technically those lands are not in a settlement bound. They're not within the settlement boundary. However, they are identified on our mapping as what the future growth area would be if lands were to be brought into the settlement boundary. So it kind of takes away any future speculation, and also helps a municipality plan what their overall master servicing plan is going to be for the area. If you know, okay, we're going to take these lands and this is what our growth projection for now is going to be for the next 25 years. You come back and you revisit that in 5 years and you say, whoa, we actually need more land. Well, let's plan for that now. You can go back and you can identify overlay areas as to where you see that future development going. But it's not, so it provides a bit of, I guess, provides the municipality with a bit of certainty with where you can expect future growth to occur. But it doesn't give the developer certainties that they can actually develop that land. So you could go back in 5 years and say, actually, no, we don't want to go there. We want to go somewhere else. But with that said, it is a good tool to look at. From a municipal perspective, even from like a master servicing perspective, as to, okay, well, here's what our overall plan is for our community. This is what we're projecting our interim growth is going to be, and here's where we're looking for the future. It's honestly, it's a newer strategy that municipalities are utilizing. It's something that some of our other local municipalities are looking at utilizing as well as part of this comprehensive review process. So I would say it's not completely off the table, no.
Yeah, no, I think it's very cost effective, obviously nowadays for smaller parcels for an initial start of this, and also reapplying lands that if developers aren't developing their land. And I thought maybe Stuart or Dan, and you can either, I'm not looking for the answer unless you have it, but I'm just, if once we invest on that sewer plant and somebody wants to sit on their land and not develop it, that we can reapply it within 5 or 6 years within our like what's submitted to us today. If someone's just sitting on that as an asset and not going to develop it, and we've got another area of our community that can use that we should reapply it, and probably be more proactive in that if we have the services available. Obviously, at this point in time, we can't. But that leads me to the next thing. Also, over the last 2 years, as this thing has developed and evolved, it's been talked about it's been, I don't even know what term I want to use, been talked about briefly is, you know, we've had 600 acres submitted. We're only allowed to apply 138 acres. You know, again, we're a large investment of a new sewer plant. How can we make that number higher? It appeared the only way to make that number higher was to reapply lands that is in different hamlets, for instance, the Granton area or the Clandeboye area. And, you know, I do think, you know, whether there should be, you know, one thing that caught my attention is how underutilized the sewer plant is in Granton. And I do think when this is done, our staff and our council, for those lands that are owned, if we're not going to reapply them in Lucan Biddulph, they should know that those lands will be reapplied the next round into Lucan Biddulph. That's my personal feeling, and that they should be notified that if they're not going to develop them, that they are going to be reapplied, and that as of right now, as far as I know, they don't even really need notice, and it can just be done. It can be reapplied as they had enough years to develop the properties. Whether I'm right or wrong on that at this time, I don't think matters, but it's a comment I wanted to make. Clandeboye Hamlet, I think, is interesting. Those lands too, for consideration to add to our 138 acres, I think should be considered, some of that. So I wanted to make that comment. Also, that's it for right now. I've got a couple other things. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Deputy Mayor. Councillor Regan, did you have your hand up?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Actually, the Deputy Mayor asked what I was going to ask about reapplying lands and about Clandeboye and Granton. So thank you, Deputy Mayor. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Okay.
We're good.
Okay. I had that in my notes as well. And I guess maybe, Dan, I don't know whether you want to address it, how that would work. And if that is an option through this process, or if that's a secondary option.
Yeah. So through the chair, certainly through any 5-year municipal comprehensive review, council has the ability and the authority to look at all of their lands and determine where the most appropriate place to grow is. You have lands, you know, in your settlement areas, which is stagnant, and you don't expect growth, and you haven't been seeing growth for a long time. It's certainly within your purview to take that land and apply it elsewhere. If there's a situation where there's land, and maybe at this particular point in time, they're unwilling or cannot develop it for whatever reason, but there's certainly an interest in developing it in the future. Maybe that's an opportunity to look at something like an overlay for that future expansion area to say, okay, well, we know you're not going to do it now, but we know you intend to do it later. So maybe there's an avenue there where you can identify a parcel of land and say, we're going to include this in the settlement area, or remove it from the settlement area, but we're going to identify it as a future potential settlement expansion. But we're going to reapply those lands elsewhere where we know that they can grow quicker at this particular point in time. That's certainly something that council can look at with this process, or again, they could look at it in 5 years when they reopen the municipal comprehensive review and look at what their population projections are at that point.
For the sake of just so we know, do you happen to know offhand how much land is in Clandeboye that is designated at this time?
Through the chair, it's somewhere in the neighborhood of 6 acres, approximately.
Okay. Okay. Nope.
Somewhere around that.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Regan, I think I saw your hand up again.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a couple of questions I've had from residents in Ward 1, if I may. There was some concern about sort of the rate of growth in the community, and I'm just wondering if council sort of has the control with respect to how fast development. So let's say at the end of the day, we've decided these are the areas that we wish to develop. This is sort of what we want it to look like. Do we have kind of going along with what the deputy mayor said, with people who are not like developers who may not be developing their land, but does council have the right, and this is a question from a resident, can they control the rate of development over the next 25 years, assuming everybody's going to build and use up the lands that have been designated to them? And I guess, sorry, just second to that too, is just with respect to revisiting the official plan, it's not just every 5 years, right? It can be, well, we can come back and look at this anytime. Is that true? Well, not to do the whole thing, but to amend, I guess is what I'm looking for. So it's 2 questions, Dan.
Yeah, so I'll address the second one first, if that's okay. Through the chair, in terms of the municipal comprehensive review process, the legislated requirement is every 5 years.
5 years.
That doesn't limit you from coming back next year and doing an entire new comprehensive review. I don't think it's cost effective to do that.
No.
Probably at the end of the day, but it's certainly possible.
No.
And then in terms of the first question, do you mind, sorry, just repeating that again?
Okay, so just does council have the right or the ability, not the right, I guess the ability to control the rate of growth? So instead of, so hypothetically, if you had 4 areas you were developing, they would develop right away, or could we say we want this staggered? We want you to spend the next 15 years building it out. Can council kind of dictate a timetable? Is guess what is sort of what I'm looking for.
Through the chair, answer would be yes and no. So why I say that is the province requires you to have a minimum 15-year land supply that is developable in your community, and of that, a 3-year supply of directly developable land. So you have to have a 3-year supply of lands that are serviced for development and a 15-year land supply for growth. So through this process, instead of using a 25-year population projection, you could in fact use a 15-year population projection, which would in turn reduce the amount of land that you need to introduce into your settlement boundary. So it would give you an avenue to limit expansion at this particular point in time, but you certainly wouldn't have the ability to completely stop expansion. Do you understand what? So
I do, yes. Yeah.
Yes, you can slow it down, but no, you can't stop it. And the way to do that is you decide 15 years or 25 years, basically at this point, or 20 years, or basically it has to be a minimum of 15 and then a maximum of 25. So anywhere in between.
Okay, and could I just really quick follow up with that? Thank you, Madam Mayor. So when I was talking about going back to the comprehensive review and not doing the whole thing, but is there an opportunity to go back and just amend parts of it without going through the whole process? That was their question.
Through the chair, yes. The municipality could initiate their own official plan amendment process if you're looking specifically at policies. However, if you're looking at like settlement boundary expansions, that in the PPS is listed as a comprehensive review. So if it's just policies, then no, you don't have to go through that whole thing. But if you're looking at shifting settlement boundaries, then that would be considered a comprehensive review process for a municipality.
Is that the same thing? Sorry, Madam Mayor, if I may. Is that also apply to reapplying the land the deputy mayor was referring to? If a developer is sitting on land for 7 or 8 years, we say, well, we're going to reapply it.
Through the chair, let me get back to you on that one. I know there are provisions that allow you to do land swaps, but in that instance, the individual has to own both properties. So my gut feeling is if you're going to take land away from someone and apply it to someone else, then that would be subject to comprehensive review.
All right. Okay. Thank you very much, Dan. Thank you very much, Madam Mayor.
Okay. Further questions, comments? Deputy Mayor Manders.
Well, Dan, I'm going to kind of give an overview of a lot of the properties that have been submitted for consideration. The I think a lot of people will be surprised again that we had 600 acres submitted, and I still find it I find it interesting how really, for me, the day it started to consider where to put people, I probably was 2 years early on the thinking, as we all got land submitted to us 12 hours, 15 hours before the meeting, which is fine and which is approved and allowed. So the time to start considering where to put people happened the day of that public meeting. And that's when it should have happened, as we were able to accept land submitted the day before. So I'm, that was a real game changer for me, to be honest, when that is allowed. There is no reason why it can't be allowed, obviously. So, and again, you don't know what lands are going to be submitted. You don't know, even 2 years ago when Stuart started the process, you don't know what lands are either going to be purchased or, the commercial development. There's a lot of stuff that has evolved in those 2 years. So, I'm going to comment on different lands that have been submitted because I do have concerns for what's been submitted for consideration. I think we need to really consider, we keep saying the other side of the road, Highway 4, Arena, whatever we want to say there, but on the other side. And I guess I'm going to start on that side and start, at the end of Princess Street by Langford Lumber property in the public meeting. And again, staff will have to, I'm not going to ask for, they'll need to clarify, I guess, that it is factual, because again, I don't know, it's not my job to know. But I found it interesting, the comments that person made on really that development potentially helping our old infrastructure, talking about the bend drain and drainage, the connectivity to an old subdivision. That's the only land that I'm aware of that's submitted for consideration that can actually connect an old subdivision with a walking, biking trail, a back path up towards the community centers, towards a new commercial development. And it was just interesting to me about maybe the land it's not a lot of land, maybe that's developable, but maybe a good land that is, there, Ron just sharing the screen there. So that's land. Yeah, where Ron's got the thing. That's the land, I just felt it was an interesting comments made on that one, on helping our old infrastructure and then creating that area connectivity to an old subdivision, and it just seemed to have a lot of benefits. So I did appreciate that. The next land I want to speak to is the next one up. I'm just going to go in a little bit of a circle. That one there is the only land that butts on to our community center. It's the only one. We're talking about 20 years growth. We saw how expensive it is to purchase land when we purchased the land for the soccer fields. We can actually, obviously through parkland dedication, can expand our land at the community center by that land. So that is intriguing to me. Again, going to, looking at the facilities that are 52 weeks, open and activities going on throughout the whole year, is the arena and obviously the commercial development. That, I always say the ability to walk, I feel, is the closer you are to those type of facilities. And one thing none of us mentioned enough too is the library. But anyways, also that. So that land that butts onto our community center, just to me I think there's a lot of communities in Ontario that would love to have land for consideration that butts onto their community center, I feel. The next land up is an interesting one that, again, has evolved over the last 2 years. I wouldn't have not have thought of that land before. Obviously, there's a proposed commercial development that's proposed. They're going to be, at least they had stated it's going to cost them around $2 million to bring services to that land. That's the type of land that they're already investing a lot of money and services to get to the commercial. I got to assume that would tie in to the land that's submitted for future residential. And this is where I'm going with, chunks of land. They've got a nice commercial development. Do they need all that acreage or just a portion of that in order to, again, to start a future residential there. And that's where I mean by, smaller pieces on multiple properties will help things like competition and attainability. Then you go up across the road. I obviously do like that as well for all the reasons I've stated amongst the other properties. That to me is that is interesting land there. Is it again, it's very close to the library, close to the community center. It's already got a crosswalk there, can come across easily. I like that land as well. And then you go across by the soccer fields, and I believe that's the land that Jeff Little has discussed. That's probably the only land, is my understanding. Staff can correct me. That is the only low-hanging fruit that we know of that's very serviceable. And it is, the soccer fields obviously are only 12 weeks of the year. The school is 10 months of the year, but that's a very, very nice property. And then to me, you go up, I find C too big of a chunk myself to discuss. It is 3 different properties, I believe. I actually don't understand why it's just chunked in as C. I've never liked that. So I'm going to discuss it from the far end to C. Where the pointer is, I feel that property there is the furthest point away from anything in our community. And that one there concerns me the most as far as being included in it, for those reasons that I stated why I like the other ones. And then when you come down on C on the other 2 properties, I just don't know if we need to have the volume at this time of those lands applied. I like Saintsbury. I think we should continue to develop on Saintsbury. We've invested in the lights. It is close to the school. It's there'll be sidewalks there. We're urbanizing that area. I just think we need to. I think that could be a slower growth at this stage, and I look at this as a 15, 30, 45-year growth as we continue out. So I wanted to comment on that. And those are my true feelings. And again, it's amazing when the land that was submitted the day before a public meeting. So that, people need to understand that the time to consider this and talk about where the best place to put people, for me, happened that night. So thank you.
Okay, thank you for that, Dave. Just a reminder to the map that Ron had pulled up was all the lands that were applied for. But if you are following along in the official plan amendment document, it's Schedule A that is really the kind of starting point for discussion as to what is being asked from a staff perspective, a consultant perspective, to be considered for the future. For the future designation. So those lines are slightly different, but you can marry the 2 maps together. Dan.
Yeah, so thanks, Madam Mayor. Through the chair, I just wanted to make one clarification because it's not on that map. That map is outdated. Mr. Manders brought up a good point about how we're working with individuals and we kept getting requests coming in, at the very last stages. So there is one additional parcel that has been requested to add to the settlement boundary. And that is the land that is directly east of the Lucan Estates or Old Clover Village subdivision. So Ron's got it pointed there as well. So we also have a request additionally, just so council is aware, that we have a request that land be added as well. I just wanted to make sure, in the public forum, that everyone equal opportunity.
And I did, and that's that I did realize. I want that. I want the public to know I did realize that was submitted, and it's one I decided not to comment on. But yeah, thank you.
Okay, any further questions or comments on where we're at right now? I think, certainly the deputy mayor has done his homework, and I think, he summed up the lands in front of us quite well. For me, I look at what's submitted. I like, if I'm looking at Schedule A, how it's drawn that takes in the parcels of land for landowner A and landowner B. I would agree with the deputy mayor that those parcels of property make the most sense. We know that development has already teed up to there, so it makes sense to continue on. But I would like the other side, and I agree, we've invested heavily in Saintsbury. The county has invested heavily in Saintsbury and will continue to this coming year. And so we need to see continuation of growth along Saintsbury. Does it need to be as heavily, look as heavily as it is drawn up today and what has been presented to us for consideration? I don't think it can be repeated too many times when we think about the importance of the community center and the hub that we have created there. I remember, I think I was either just mayor, it was just as I was finishing up my first term as deputy mayor. And Ron and I went to, we made a presentation to education officials in Toronto when we were trying to secure the facility that we have now, the school that the old Lucan Public School. And we talked back then of that vision of that end of town being the community, of having library, municipal services, medical center, and then the vibrant community center across the road. And it didn't happen like we thought it was going to when we made the presentation back then. But that's what we've got today, through partnerships with the county, through private investment. And then, we're going to see what's going to happen with the revitalization of the arena. And it is the hub of the community. People, as I said during Hockeyville, at some point, everybody's going to be in that building, whether it's for a sporting event, whether it's for a seniors event, whether it's for a community event. The programming that is being expanded there, what is being offered up at that community center. We talk about walkability. It makes sense to have other development near that facility. So I certainly would be very interested in staff revisiting what that can look like, and investigating how that can be done. The other property that is, I think, worth discussing, it was the land that the deputy mayor first started his circle on, and it's landowner G. I know that it does provide, it does come with a whole set of issues. There's floodplain there. But when I look at that property, I see that possibility of kind of squaring off that end of the community and finishing off again what has already been started. So, for me, those are properties that I think we should be looking at, seeing how they can be further brought into the discussion and what it would mean in a new look for what's being presented. Okay, any other comments from council? Questions? Concerns? Councillor Regan?
Thank you. I'm just wondering about a time frame for staff getting back to us so we are able to move forward.
Guess that would be a next steps question.
Yes.
What happens after this meeting?
I'm not sure who has the answer.
Ron.
Okay.
So I'll take a stab at this first, and I can be corrected by Mr. Fitzgerald there. So through you, Madam Mayor, I think what staff was hoping was to get some direction from council as to what areas they foresee future growth happening. And once we get that feeling, then we can bring that back to both Stuart and Dan and get that map redrawn to sort of the next presentation to council, taking into account council's comments. So I think that's kind of where we're at. We're looking for some direction. I heard a couple of parcels from the mayor. I heard about 4 parcels from the deputy mayor. I guess that's only 2. We need 3. So I need some more some more feedback before we can go further. I think so.
If I may, Madam Mayor.
Absolutely.
So I would concur with the deputy mayor and support that direction to move forward and perhaps revisit with that suggestion in mind.
Well, I think we need to ask staff to essentially go back and reinvestigate based on the comments that were heard at the public meeting and heard tonight. But as Ron said, 2 of us have spoken about certain parcels. Are there any, maybe that's not a conclusion that the rest of council is interested in. Maybe there's members of council that are interested in another parcel of land. So I think maybe that's where Ron was going with his statement. Councillor Hodgins.
Thank you. I would say I generally agree with what you sort of walked through, Madam Mayor, looking at opportunities for landowner G and landowner F. There are a lot of benefits that were discussed. Talked about that balanced growth and rounding out the development of the community, as well as that walkability, connecting old neighborhoods. I think there's a lot of great ideas there. At the start of the official plan amendment document, it does talk about that growth will be directed to the locations that can be developed most efficiently and cost effectively on full municipal services. So I do think it's important that we, I guess, aim for some of those lands as well. That I guess would be landowner B, the areas that have been identified as the best opportunity or not needing additional services, just because that can be easily developed without costs that are going to have to be recovered through development charges. So I do think it does make sense to continue with those as shown in the Schedule A. But I would support also looking at opportunities, as we have discussed tonight, particularly around F and G as shown on the map which is presented right now.
Thank you for that, Jayden. All right, further comments, discussion. I'm going to ask one more time.
Sorry, Madam Mayor,
Okay,
I had my hand, it was me.
Oh, sorry, it was
no,
off.
it
was off camera.
Yes, sorry. I would just sort of go through, if I may, on the map, landowner, and I'm looking at some of the drawings and those sort of things with landowner G, landowner F. Again, joining that we're talking about rounding out the community, and I like the idea of having sort of landowner G, F, E, and these are areas, of course, where I think that we may have sort of opportunities for more diversity of housing. And I think, again, with that central hub of the downtown and also with the community center as well. And we've talked about the walkability and trail systems and those sorts of things. The commercial center as well. as we go through that. The one thing about for landowner, one of the things I found interesting, and I just wonder when I'm looking at sort of that proposal, is the lands that would be abut the and as the deputy mayor has said already, would abut our community center. And I don't think, and I actually checked, I don't think there's a community our size in Ontario that would have an opportunity to be able to do that, to make those lands a little bit bigger that are right adjoining to our community center. So I do like that area as well. If I look over to the one section right up in the far northeast that the deputy mayor did talk about, where the settlement there, I do feel, it's not just my feeling, is that somewhat of a disconnect with the community, just sort of being that sort of far away from everything, right along Gilmore. I guess it's Gilmore at the soccer fields, and that again, I agreed that would definitely finish that off. That wouldn't be sort of an issue for me. But like I said, that section, if I got my map, and I hope my directions made, but the area that we're looking at sort of for the end of Watson Street over here, so landowner G, F, E, those are areas there that I would like to see some more investigation, if we could, from staff, just to see how that might all play out, what the feasibility is of including those lands as well. Again, it's to me, it just seems to be, and I don't know if the right word is rounding out the community or not, but when we think about all of the amenities that we have down in that area, that's where I think we really need to look to put people. I think that would be the best fit for people. That would be the right thing to do. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Regan. Any last comments? Deputy Mayor Manders.
I just realized, must be my old age here. I think during the, I thought the one map had landowner D submitted in with C at the public meeting, I thought, and maybe they've added D. And that's why I briefly looked at it. I do want to comment on D, that I like D as well as C on a scaled down, again, version. That I think it's a good area. Again, I think we should develop on Sainsbury, but I think we need to, that is right beside our, that the community owns, the storm water, water management pond. I do think that obviously that one there with the services and that is probably the first one along Sainsbury for consideration. But again, I just don't know if the chunks are too big everywhere that we're looking at. And again, hopefully we can apply, some land to add to this, because again, there's been a lot of land submitted for consideration. But I missed that it was separate there on D, so I wanted to comment on that. So, and I do have a question for Dan now, or Jeff even. Out of these lands, well, this map is up, I don't know enough about infrastructure and stormwater management ponds and sewer and right of ways. And, obviously people will be disappointed in their lands, maybe not getting submitted and or partially getting submitted. But is there any way that if a land can obstruct someone else's land, that they won't be able to proceed to the sewer plant, or will make it difficult for the people, or that can be dealt with at the time of approval? I mean, that's a concern of mine, because obviously it's, and not for, I want to still put people where it's best, but is there any way to protect the lands that they don't, all of a sudden they get approved and then the other landowners are going, well, this is going to be very cost ineffective all of a sudden for you because we don't like you. Don't know any other way to phrase it.
Yeah, and through the chair, I guess Dan, I'll comment on that. That I think, I don't see. I mean, I see options. I don't see roadblocks. So if we come back. If we look at other, we look at different lands that have been applied to, there is a couple of different options for each property. on the west side that we can look at. So if one property did not get put in, there is another option of being able to service any one or a variety or a multiple of those properties. So I'm not concerned that one property is the key to the whole development of the town. I think there's enough options available to us. The hope would be to pick the option that would be the beneficial for all the properties. That would be beneficial to the town, would be beneficial to the existing infrastructure. And that would be the number one solution, and that's what we'll look at. But as we go forward, there's different options available for us to service these properties.
Yeah. Okay. No, very good. Yeah. It's like I say, I like what's on the map right now. I've lived in Lucan all my life, and I look at what's on there right now, and I just think of this as, again, scaled down, and then that's our build out. And whether that's maybe a 30-year look or 20-year look, there's a lot of developers that have commented that, that we get our sewer capacity to where it needs to be, and the lands get submitted and they're ready to roll, that again, if we stay in this robust building market we're in, then this could be a 15-year, not a 25-year outlook. So anyways, no, very good. Thank you.
Dan, was there something I saw that you were unmuted, Dan Fitzgerald. I didn't know if you wanted to add something to Jeff's comments or.
Through the chair. No, I think Jeff did a great job answering that question.
Great. Councillor Hodgins.
Thank you. I just wanted to add a few more comments further to some comments that Councillor Regan made at the start of the meeting. Kind of broader picture comments about diversity of options for development and growth. And I think by looking at some of these other areas and other options for development, it's maybe looking at, or it's creating more opportunities for different types of development and ownership. And I know the document talks about type and tenure, so that would include things like rental properties, which I'm sure are in high demand with the current cost of housing. So I think by looking at some of these other areas for development, it may open up opportunities for diversifying the housing stock. And I just wanted to ask a quick question. I think the report or the MCR, it mentions that the constraints mapping that that was completed, it took into account a lot of things, including the servicing, natural environment, and other things like that. But it was completed at a high level, and I'm just wondering if, as we move into the next stage of deciding these areas, if we need to have more technical assessments, the feasibility of development of certain properties. Like, I guess it's going to be a big decision that we're making once we select these areas. And I guess it's just a question perhaps to staff, whether additional technical investigations may be warranted to better understand some of these constraints, particularly around servicing.
And maybe, Madam Mayor, I'll jump on that. So one of the things I think this process will do is I think we'll see a commitment to an area. And once we get that commitment, then we can, exactly what Councillor Hodgins said, then we can take the next step and start doing a more in-depth look at options and engineering for services. I think that's the key right now, is because if we look at them all at once, there's such a variety of wheel spokes going out that it's a little bit overwhelming. But if we do know that we can service these properties. So once we get an idea of where council has a commitment to go, then we can definitely do a more thorough investigation into which is the best option and how to get there. It's a little bit of the egg and the chicken system there, but the idea though is we do know the engineering can be done, we do know the servicing can be done. The next step will be to find out the best option of that engineering. But if we could get the commitment through this process, then we can go to the next step. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that answers my questions. And I guess a lot of that assessment was likely tackled through the master servicing studies that BM Ross completed, and sort of assessing like the sewer capacity and where there's constraints and bottlenecks in the system. And I guess I just want to ensure that we don't take a big step in deciding we want to go with this land, only to then later discover that there's a huge cost implication or something that we weren't aware of, that some further technical assessment would have brought to light. But I think we probably have a pretty good grasp of those constraints through the master servicing study.
And through the chair and the flow study that's being done right now, it's going to pinpoint a little better capacities that we have. But when we're talking about such large developments, we already know there is, no matter what, there's going to be upgrades to existing systems. So we already know no matter where we go, unless it's landowner B, there is going to be upgrades through the system, no matter which property we choose. So that's already a given.
Any more follow-up, Councillor Hodgins?
No, thank you very much.
Just on that topic of the constraints, I mean, that figure that's in the appendix, whatever, figure 5.6, this map here, I mean, it really does spell out the good opportunity, some opportunity, and where the planning constraints are. And if you can almost place the lands that have been applied for on top of it, and you can kind of see what the BM Ross report showed us that we took on a couple years ago, and it will echo exactly, I think, what Jeff just said. Pretty much. Deputy Mayor Manders.
Yeah, just a quick comment too on DC charges. I don't believe they've been talked about too much, and to go off Councillor Hodgins' comments. I've talked to Jeff a little bit on this, that to maintain an area, one area only for infrastructure improvement, for that, and I'll call it's a minimal cost compared to our sewer plant expansion. It's a minimal upcharge to be you have a variety, and again, as Councillor Reagan was commenting on earlier, to have two areas that maybe we got to do infrastructure improvements on in our community, to have more lands put in, I think simply better for the young families and people moving into our community to have options in a variety. So the DC charge impact is obviously is the sewer plant, and we if we were only going to one area for a major upgrade, the other, to be able to open up so much more options for two areas, the DC charges, realistically is very minimal. So I just, I don't think, us deciding for the expansion that we've decided to do at the sewer plant is the impact, probably 80-90% of the impact of the sewer, the DC charges. So anyway, so just thought I'd comment on that.
Okay, thank you for that. Okay, further comments or questions? Input? Okay, I'm going to ask one more time. All right, then we had spoken about, I guess, making a motion to direct staff to further investigate based on comments made tonight. I don't know whether Ron or Tina want to make it clerky for us, but if that's kind of the general idea, that would give staff direction to come back to council, then I would probably entertain a mover and a seconder for that. And if Ron, you're okay with that kind of wording?
Madam Mayor, if I may, I think if we use sort of general wording that takes into account the comments made by the members of council during this evening's council meeting, staff will bring forward, based on those comments and those that direction, staff will bring back a further report for council's consideration.
Okay, and I guess before I ask for that motion, I just want to, I guess I would ask Dan this question. At what point will you no longer receive comments from the public? I mean, who knows who's watching us tonight and, might have further comments to give us. Is there a cutoff that you would accept those and those comments?
Yeah, so through the chair, what I would say is, in light of the discussion that has occurred tonight, I think it's certainly beneficial to support staff as well as Stuart to go back and look at the report a bit further, weigh some options, and see if there's additional planning rationales that can apply to look at the lands. So with that said, generally speaking, if it does come back and there's changes to the recommendations or the official plan amendment report, we will host another public meeting because that it's a significant change to the previous version that was applied. And I think Stuart actually said it last time. We will accept comments right up until council makes a decision on this.
Okay.
If the public still has to provide comments to us, certainly please feel free to do so. We will continue to take them until a final recommendation is brought forward.
Okay, thank you for that. So Deputy Mayor Manders.
So sorry, I forget, it was either the question was a side skipped or answered and I didn't listen to a timeline guesstimate. Was that answered or kind of just skipped over?
Chair,
Guess.
there's been quite a bit of information provided tonight. I think I'll have to go back and digest that and review it further, but we would obviously try to bring it back to council in a timely manner. With that said, this is a large process. It does require circulation in advance if there is a change to the draft. So that is the circulation process in advance of a public meeting again. So looking at least a month plus before we're back to another public meeting.
I'm surprised, actually. I didn't, again, I've heard the term that this was a starting point for consideration. I didn't realize that, that's interesting comments. And maybe everyone else is aware of that, but I wasn't. Thank you.
Okay, so if Councillor Hodgins.
Just one quick comment, and,
Yep.
and you spoke to it earlier, Madam Mayor, about the potential inclusion of like a fitness facility in the industrial zoning. I just wanted to say I'm supportive of that as well. I'm not sure we landed on consensus with that as a group, but just wanted to note my support of that request as well.
Okay, that's great. Thank you for that, Councillor Hodgins. And I am thinking that I am frozen. Am I okay? Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, good. Just looking at my my screen and everybody's a little bit choppy. So probably somebody put a movie on upstairs or something. Okay, so with that in mind, if there isn't any more comment on this, then I would ask for a mover and a seconder for the motion that Ron drafted on for us. Deputy Mayor Manders and Councillor Hodgins, and all opposed. And that's carried. Okay. So thank you very much for that discussion, everyone. We do not have much left on the agenda. So if everybody's okay with that, we'll just continue on rather than taking a break. But I do want to thank everybody for their input. And certainly, as Dan noted, he's got a lot of information to digest with Stuart, and we'll look forward to that coming back to us. So moving on, we do have the council minutes from our special council meeting for November 30th and our regular council meeting minutes from December 21st in front of us. And if there's nothing to be amended, then I would ask for a mover and a seconder to approve those minutes as circulated. Councillor Regan and Councillor Hodgins, all opposed, and that's carried. Moving on to the business arising from the minutes. I don't think that there was anything to be added. I know that there's one item on the list that Ron will be speaking to. Was there anything from our minutes that council wanted to add to business arising? Okay, then we'll move to our correspondence. There is only a few items that have been received over the holidays. I don't believe anything needed to be spoken to unless council had a wish to pull one. Then I would ask for a mover and a seconder to accept the items of correspondence for information. Councillor Westman and Deputy Mayor Manders. All opposed? And that's carried. Okay, we'll move on to the committee reports. Now, I don't believe any committees met over the holidays. I'll just kind of look for a nod of heads. So I don't believe that there's any reports coming forward from those committees. Then we'll move into staff reports and I'll turn it over to you, Ron.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So the report before council tonight is in regards to the animal control agreement. I briefly discussed this at the last meeting. It is in regards to where it pertains to the fact that Lobo Animal Care and Control ceased to provide services to Lucan Biddulph effective December 31st. Since we were given that notice, we tried to get somebody a little bit closer than what we actually ended up finding, but I am confident in the services that Hillside Kennels can and will provide our residents of Lucan Biddulph. They are the current service provider for Middlesex Centre. And since finding out, and actually I went to visit the kennel itself to just make sure that we knew what we were getting into, and happy to say it's very, very neat, tidy, very well looked after. I did get a good feeling from the people there, and they come highly recommended by Middlesex Centre. And I was also in touch with OPP actually in Oxford County, used them as well. So they came highly regarded in that sense. So again, the difference in fees, Lobo charged us $85 for a call out, and that's a case where somebody has sort of corralled a stray dog, and they have called us for a pickup. So we will call Hillside Kennels. They will come out and pick them up. Lobo used to charge $85 for that call out. Hillside charges $150, which, considering the distance, I think is a pretty reasonable fee. And taking into account that the number of dogs we have per year that fall into this category, between 3 and 5, we're not talking a large dollar difference in there. So again, the report, I won't bore you with the report. The recommendation is that the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Lucan Biddulph authorize the mayor and clerk to execute the animal control agreement with Hillside Kennels. And further, that Hillside Kennels be formally appointed animal control officers for the Township of Lucan Biddulph effective January 1st, 2022. Happy to take any questions.
Great, thank you for that. Any questions or comments on that report? Who knew it would be so difficult to find somebody to fulfill this service? But thank you for all that legwork, Ron. And if there's not any comment, then the motion in front of us is that the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Lucan Biddulph authorize the mayor and clerk to execute the animal control agreement with Hillside Kennels, and further that Hillside Kennels be formally appointed animal control officers for the Township of Lucan Biddulph effective January 1st, 2022. Can I get a mover and a seconder for that, please? Councillor Westman and Councillor Regan. All opposed? That's carried. Did you have anything else, Ron? Okay. And then moving on through our committee or through our staff reports, I don't believe that there is anything else to be reported on. And the only one that I think I'll look to is Jeff to see if there is anything that he had to bring forward. And I don't believe he does. Okay. Councillor comments. Councillor Westman.
Yeah.
So we've lost you, Councillor Westman. So maybe turn your camera off and maybe that'll help with your audio. Okay. Maybe we'll get him back. And in the meantime, I'll move on to, are there any other comments that councillors would like to share at this time? Okay, then we will move on to any changes to budget, any notices of motion. And we have no other motions, no accounts to approve. So we'll move right into bylaws. We have 3 bylaws. Oh, Councillor Westman's come back. Okay, so you're muted. Let's try this again.
Yeah, I'm having some technical difficulties here. But anyhow, I just wanted to thank staff for taking care of the power outages that happened a few weeks ago and fixing the Christmas lights that were not working over in Grant. And I know a lot of people really appreciated that. And working over the holidays to keep our roads open and safe. So that's kind of an important thing that I feel like we need to acknowledge the amount of work that goes on behind the scenes. A lot of people don't really know. And I just want to thank staff for keeping us looking good. So.
Appreciate that, Councillor Westman. And I know that Jeff will take that back to his team as well. We can get that if Parks and Rec helped out as well. So thanks very much for that. So we'll move into our bylaws. We've got 3 bylaws in front of us. The first one is bylaw 01-2022, a bylaw to provide for interim tax levies for the year 2022. This is a annual bylaw that we do pass. Bylaw 02-2022 being a bylaw authorizing the execution of an agreement for animal control services with Hillside Kennels, and bylaw 03-2022 to adopt and confirm all actions and proceedings of the Council of the Township of Lucan Biddulph at the council meeting held on January the 4th. So that if no one cares to speak to these bylaws, and that's bylaws 01-2022 through 03-2022, inclusive, on their first, second, and third reading, that they be considered to have been read a first time and passed, read a second time and passed, and read a third time and passed. Any mover and a seconder for that, please? Councillor Regan and Councillor Hodgins. All opposed? Okay, and that's carried. And resolved that the council meeting be adjourned at 8:29 p.m. A mover and a seconder for that, please. Deputy Mayor Manders and Councillor Westman. All opposed? And that's carried.